Hi everybody, my name is Luke and I am the Deputy President for Dublin Students' Union in Blanchardstown. Welcome back to the series. This series is to encourage students to run for elections and to bridge that kind of political gap between students and the wider politics realm. Throughout this series, we'll be joined by multiple progressive community leaders and exploring topics such as minorities in leadership, why bother running, and learning a little bit more about our guests each session. Today, I am joined by the incredible Senator Fintan Warfield from Sinn Féin. And for the benefit of our students watching, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, Fintan? So kind of who you are and what you do on a kind of a regular.
Yeah, and look, thanks a million for having me on. I joined Sinn Féin when I was 16, quite an early age to pick a party. I wouldn't place pressure on anyone to choose a party so young, but I don't regret anything. I've the same ambition about reunifying the country, about building a socialist Ireland as I did back when I was 16. So I would encourage anyone to get active in politics. I ran for the local council in South Dublin County Council in 2014, and that was after kind of completing a degree down in Galway in GMIT in film and television, and going away to play music on the road in the States and Ireland as well. So so my work outside of politics is music. I don't get much of an opportunity to do that, particularly not this year. So that's how I found myself on South Dublin County Council. I became the mayor of South Dublin County Council that year. I was the youngest elected mayor of South Dublin County Council, and I was elected to that position by the local councillors. And it's a very symbolic position. It's you represent the council as its first citizen. Luckily, that was the year of marriage equality, and that was the campaign for marriage equality. So I've been lucky, as I reflect on 10 years in politics or more. I've been involved at a time of huge social change, and that's very much what I got involved to achieve. And obviously, we've a lot to do, particularly in terms of economic change, in housing and in health as well. So, the work is never finished.
That's really cool. And then I think that's particularly really cool, the fact that you were the youngest elected mayor as well at that time, which is, that definitely going to speak to our students on a much kind of broad level. Then kind of like, obviously after the introduction to yourself, is there anything maybe that you'd like to share with our students, maybe one or two accomplishments that you've achieved in your time in politics, or even anything outside, maybe the best soccer player back in second class, but no, in politics anyway, definitely, for sure.
I would say, jokingly, like, not screwing up is having been elected so young. I look back and I say, God, like, how I did it without messing up or putting a foot wrong. I'm quite proud of that. But no, more so I think would be the active involvement that I had in the referendum for civil marriage equality and for repeal. Just like I mentioned, it's been such a period of change. We've recognised the travelling community, we've recognised transgender people, and obviously there's so much more work to do in that regard. But just playing a role in those campaigns, I would count as something I'm proud of. In terms of the work then in Leinster House, I think I make quite an effort to maintain relationships with people across the political divide, because I see that as a way in which to campaign, really, to bring people who would have completely opposing views, people in Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, to bring them with me on issues. So all of the pieces of legislation that I brought forward, all the proposed laws that I've made, have been co-signed by others. And so, yeah, I brought forward about 10 pieces of legislation, ranging from a lowering of the voting age to extending the recognition that exists for adult trans people to 16 and 17-year-olds, to young trans people, trying to get legal recognition for non-binary people, and working with the Transgender Equality Network and campaign groups to that end as well. So I think the legislative work, kind of using legislation as a campaigning tool, is something that I'm quite proud of as well.
No, that's really, really cool. And I remember my friend Noah and myself, we were invited to watch you propose the bill for the banning of conversion therapy as well, which was absolutely incredible. And obviously from someone from that community as well, myself, that does mean so much, and it's great to see that represented in our kind of national kind of level as well. And I suppose that kind of like feeds into like a really, really important kind of run for leadership role piece then, because there's so many barriers for people as well, even from student politics all the way up to senatorships, TDs, even presidency. There's a lot of barriers, and there's a perception that politics is it's funnily enough, coming from the LGBT community, there is that kind of element that it's not for us, that our job is kind of on the sidelines doing the protests and stuff, and those barriers are really, really strong. Every time we see someone who's not afraid to show their voice, an openly kind of queerly identifying politician, the backlash is real. And there's a lot of people who don't want to see that kind of person succeed. Obviously, if you're comfortable telling us, have you ever encountered any of those barriers? And what are kind of why do you think it's important to run for these leadership roles to tackle them barriers as well?
Not everyone has to be a leader, and leadership is amounts to very, very different things in very different ways. I would be more inclined to think about how people can be role models, how people can be active citizens, like and channel their time and their energy into being activists, and then at that point, then if the opportunity presents itself to run for positions, that people should absolutely do that. It's a really interesting experience, and I'm so familiar with running for an election now, be it knocking on doors or through a very old school kind of shallowed electoral system where you're counting on the support of your colleagues, if you like, in politics. I'm reluctant to say everyone should run for politics, but it's a very interesting thing to do, to put yourself out there. But that's exactly what it is, and it's not for everyone, I wouldn't say. And I've had a wobble this past year for the first time. I've encountered a lot of abuse online. We've had to go to the guards. I haven't felt particularly safe leaving work or Leinster House at times. So and content and things like that are weaponized in a way that they were never before. And so as a queer in politics, any previous contributions I've made now are kind of compiled by those who oppose me or us, in a way to kind of present those old homophobic tropes, and we've seen that with Roger O'Gorman as well. And we see a really aggressive campaign against the Lord Mayor of Dublin. So it can be tough, and I would place an emphasis on like activism and active citizenship, and then people who want to put their name forward and to represent to publicly represent what they stand for, to represent that in the college. Absolutely would encourage that as well,
No, absolutely, and I'm so sorry to hear that you've been facing that backlash. It's always it's always difficult, always battling for you know, to try and put the personal side aside and then, you know, focus on the politics of it. But can I ask then, kind of on that then, has there been kind of any work that either yourself, or obviously yourself, I know you've gone into great detail, but even kind of your colleagues have done to ensure that we really do tackle those barriers and kind of on the ground when it comes to kind of like breaking them down? Is there any kind of substantive work that you'd like to share from your colleagues' perspective, or even kind of campaigns that you've seen that really are good to like get rid of this kind of like really evil kind of nastiness that is coming with kind of all of this as well?
Do you mean by in terms of the far right? And I mean, like, there's an online safety bill coming in. It won't change a whole lot. It's really tough to tackle the kind of pile on. You know, my experience of going to the authorities is that they're looking for sustained kind of online attacks from one individual, you know, and so because bullying and harassment, you know, certain things online, they're not against the law, so it's difficult to regulate that space. But just in terms of people, you know, that like back to running for election, like the people need to see themselves in Leinster House and at local level in order to see that they can be there and see that it can work for the type of person they are. And at the moment, that's just not, you know, the Dáil is not representative of Irish society, you know, in terms of, in all respects. And I think what would be great is that if the Seanad was reformed, you know, the one thing that could be done even without change is that if the Taoiseach nominated use their power to nominate 11 nominees to the Seanad, that they were used to, you know, address representation issues in the Oireachtas. I think that would make a huge change to the Seanad and to the Oireachtas as a whole. You know, I think lowering the voting age, allowing people who've been here, living here for 5 years, the right to vote in all elections would represent a significant step forward on that as well. You know, and I've been involved in those two issues as well.
That's really cool. I know myself, I'm a big believer of if you can dream it, you can do it, and if you don't see it, then you're destined to be it. And you know, the whole point on the Taoiseach's nominees is actually a really interesting point. I know we've had the first woman from a travelling background elected as a senator as well through that, and that type of representation, it's crucial. It's vital that people see themselves represented in their politics. But you know, thanks so much for that. And I suppose, when we've so many other issues kind of facing us, such as like the climate crisis, and I think it's important to call it that as well, because we're standing on the precipice of a catastrophe about to happen, you know, and the call for a greener tomorrow. Being a community leader yourself and progressive community leader, how do you think that our generation of kind of future leaders and in kind of student politics could make that difference in kind of tackling that climate issue from, you know, their kind of leadership position?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the Union of Students in Ireland have shown, I mean, Annie Hoey's also in the Seanad now as well, have shown leadership around so many issues in the past. I think there's scope there in terms of the representation of students to make a huge noise about climate. I mean, we've seen young people lead that charge here across Europe, across the States. And not only for, you know, the personal changes that we can make in our lives, but campaign for those big, like, look, we all know what needs to happen. You either believe it or you don't. And I think politicians, the electorate, in terms of the last election, where the Greens have done well, have shown that there's a huge appetite to do this. You know, we need to be more ambitious about in a couple of in all sectors, but you know, transport, the plan is still to be very reliant on the private car. but just in terms of that being an electric car, I mean, that needs to be, the approach must be around public transport, light rail in all our cities, and electric buses. There's huge work to do in terms of residential, in retrofitting homes, in forestation. Like, we need to plant 8,000 hectares a year. And importantly, I think, and I see it happen a lot, just given that we didn't have an industrial revolution in the South, and given our given the size of the agriculture sector, we need to bring farmers with us, and we can't allow an urban versus rural divide happen. Farmers are under huge pressure to meet standards. That pressure is only going to grow. So, we need to bring farmers with us, and we can't allow those divides to be. We can't do without them, basically, and we can't allow those urban rural divides develop more than they are now.
100%. So that means for any student from a farming background, I want to see your name on that nomination list ASAP, so you can come with us on this. No, but thanks to that. Then I suppose, kind of like, just as we're kind of coming to the end of our chat, then I suppose just touch on why bother running at all? Like, that's such an easy question to ask so many people. Why bother being that change maker? Why bother being that leader? Is it worth it? Can people do it? And I suppose, what would you say to that?
If not you, who? And Sinead, like, I mean, be the change that you want to be. It's a bit of a, it's oft said, but no, seriously, like, if not you, who?
That's, that is a really, really good piece of advice. I think the imposter syndrome really starts setting in with people as soon as
fake it till you make it. Like.
No, it's so true. Anyone running for elections always has this kind of like voice, this little inner saboteur in the back of their head that says, no, you can't do it. And
yeah, and like, I'm not the type of person that's very good at like a rallying campaign speech. I enjoy public speaking. I enjoy speaking at Sinn Féin Ardèche, but like I said earlier, leadership means a whole lot of different things, and people have all sorts of different skills that work in politics.
100%. I am going to throw in a small curveball here. Okay. Have you any tips or tricks or kind of little inside trader secrets to perhaps maybe help someone who might be consider running for election? Is there anything that maybe that has worked for you in the past? Even kind of small little tips or tricks, but just it really cements that piece.
Yeah, you probably hear a sound here. My computer fans are. The fans on my computer are having a mind of their own here. I mean, think strategically. Like, think 5 years, 10 years down the line. And other people have always said, knock on doors. So be in touch with the people you're aiming to represent.
100%. Another good piece that I have heard is don't feed the trolls. They love it. They love the attention.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Then I suppose kind of just to almost wrap up on then, what advice would you give to people who are already putting their names forward? They're already there. They're about to sign, seal, and deliver their nomination, or they're literally just about to consider going for it. If you could give them one piece of advice.
I mean, just meet as many people as you can. Like, meet as many of the people who are going to vote as you can. That's literally all you can do.
100%, and virtually, of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic. Definitely don't be meeting people in person. That's a definite no. But I think even
just get a group of people around you who not only support you but will challenge you. I have those people in my life who call you out when something's not right. So they're as important as the people who support you, you know.
Do you know what? That's probably the best piece of advice anybody could give to anybody. It's so important that when you are putting ideas forward, that you do have people who can call you out on it and saying, no, that doesn't actually work. Because what you're doing is you're getting that feedback kind of immediately. But that actually brings us to the end of our tea time chat. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. That will absolutely make such a huge impact on our students who are considering running, and even our colleagues from around the country who see this video as well, to maybe consider running for a different position or a national position or anything. Is there anywhere that you'd like to plug your social media, your party's social media, anything like that before we kind of wrap up?
All my social medias are private now at this point. Yeah, you can see my work on. I keep a list of the legislation that I've worked on my website. It's fintanwarfield.com. That's about it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And just on that, we're going to wrap up our session. But then again, on behalf of TU Dublin Students' Union, I would just like to pass on the biggest thanks ever. And hopefully we will keep in touch, and we will see you back for election stuff very soon.
Thanks a million, Luke. Have a good one.